Someone going to be with you? Is someone going to be with you?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't think so.
Oh, wow.
Morning. Thank you.
But I also wanted to ask you about the tone, because obviously the tone of this is a bit different from the obviously reflects the tone of the book. But what do you think as far as getting that tone just right to this? What was the biggest challenge?
Do you know, it was interesting seeing it with an audience last night, because I've been watching it all on my own or with my producers or my editor for a number of months. And you get very kind of sort of tunnel visioned about it after a while. And there was something about the material I really adored, the melancholy of it, the loneliness of it, and the fact that these three iconic characters that some of the audience have grown up with are suddenly out in the wilderness, as it were, fending for themselves. And I found that whole notion very moving. It was almost like watching your own kids go out into the world, a very dangerous, dark place, and you feel for them quite profoundly. And I've got a feeling that audiences are quite enjoyed the intensity of those colours, you know, and the darkness. This is Yeah, not change your phoned the studio and I said, guys, I might need to pick a couple of things up. And they said, okay, that's fine.
Do you remember
They were
the
cool.
last day with the screenplays when they were all on set together?
We shot a scene on a viaduct outside Hogwarts. It was really beautiful, really sunny. It was all beautifully built. And it's a very tender scene where they sort of reflect on everything that's happened, all the battles and everything, and they hold hands and the camera pulls away. It's a really tender, lovely scene. And Emma particularly I said to them, look guys, this is the last scene we're all going to do with you three together in front of the camera. So you're not just saying, it's not just the last scene of these three characters in the movie, this is your last scene in this series of films. That's what today's about. And it infused it with a kind of emotion, which was really moving actually.
Isn't that a couple months or so ago about 3D and the Hallows?
Yes.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Of course.
Process.
No, of course. The studio were really, really keen that we make these movies in 3D, but I'd started shooting them in 2D. And we have a really good relationship with the studio. They're very respectful to us as a creative team. They're always very supportive. When we need things, they usually help us out. And from a business perspective, it would have made a huge difference to them to have both of these movies in 3D. So we said, okay, let's give it a go. We'll roll with that. And we chose some people we really liked a lot to do the conversion process. And we started that process. And we noodle everything. When we look at visual effects, we change them a lot. And everything goes through a process of assessment and revision and assessment and revision. That's how we get to where we get to. And the 3D stuff started to come in, and I have to tell you, some of it looked absolutely beautiful, and some of it needed work. So we would send back the stuff that needed work. And this process was ongoing, and we got to a point where, because of our high standard, if we're going to do 3D on the film, it needs to make it better, it needs to enhance it, it needs to make it a more immersive experience. It can't just be a bolt-on. So we got to the process where we could have ended up with a really cool 3D film if we'd had an extra 3 months or an extra 2 months to get it done properly, and we didn't. So we phoned up the studio and said, guys, this is going to be a bit of a problem. And it was a really difficult time for all of us because the studio had already made huge commitments to this. But we made the grown-up decision, and great credit to them, that they agreed. It was crazy pushing ahead with it, and so we pulled the whole 3D thing for part one, and it was the right thing to do. And but because we started the whole 3D thing way back in the spring, it's still ongoing, and we're optimistic that it's going to really be there for part two.
The way you direct and shoot, even though you're doing it in 2D, are you thinking 3D?
Do you know, it's really interesting because I'm learning really fast about this stuff. And I would have shot a lot of part one very differently. Because long lenses are not great in 3D. I would have used much wider lenses generally. But actually also, shooting in 3D is laboriously slow. I know Martin Scorsese is having a terrible, it just takes time. Because, and that the fact that it takes time, the whole spontaneity of making a film where you want to really move on your feet. So I actually think conversion is creatively a more enjoyable way to make a movie, because you keep the spontaneity of shooting normally, perhaps with more wider lenses, without the sort of technical dogma of this needs to be there and that needs to be there. So, but
trouble is, quality-wise, it's often best to film, isn't it? Or so they say.
Well, there are conversion elements in Avatar, for example, which I absolutely adored as a movie, and the 3D experience, and that was obviously the benchmark. And they spent 8 years doing it, rather than 8 months. So that says a lot, really. But having said that, the stuff I saw, the stuff we really liked, was beautiful on part 1, and it was. It just gave us a depth, because I didn't want anything coming out of the screen. I just wanted I wanted to use it really, really subtly, so it just gave some sequences a really beautiful, subtle depth. And it was actually Peter Doyle who grades for us, who's the colourist. He did Lord of the Rings, and he's done all my Potter films. He's a really gifted grader. And he sat there and he said, you know what, this is a really interesting aesthetic. Because we'd actually, it's not 3D, it's kind of 3D, and using it like music, where sometimes it's very subtle, and just occasionally we'd let it breathe out. But I didn't have time to use it like music, because you have to step back and look at it and then change change it. So, but hopefully on part 2 we'll be able to do that, I hope.
Of footage you converted for part 1, is there any chance we might see it at some point, like special Blu-ray 3D at some point? Or has it been chucked out completely?
No, it's this. I can't tell you. They spent so much money and we spent so much time that at some point I'm sure they'll utilise it either on a Blu-ray release or on a new theatrical release. I mean, it's millions and millions of dollars we spent, and some really beautiful work. It's just that we didn't get there to a standard that was needed for this film, because it's a benchmark for the studio. It's a big, and for us it was too important to.
Do you think you've set a sort of standard now, setting an example for others in the industry? Because some movies, they put out 3D and it's cheap 3D. It doesn't come across very well.
I think audiences just wise up to that, honestly. Yeah, and I think I think it's aesthetically got to help the storytelling. It's got to help the storytelling, because otherwise it's just and that's what we were trying to explore and play with and get right. So actually, it adds value. That's the whole point of it, ideally.
Do you think you'll take a vacation, or are you still
Yes.
doing so much?
I'm doing.
Now that you're going to, you have to have so much more work.
I've got quite a lot of work to do on part 2, so I'm going to have a couple of weeks off at Christmas, and I'm especially tired today because we had our premiere last night, and we had lots of drinks, and I'll be fine after a Barocca. And there were so many people at the premiere, and it was a lovely evening. So I was stayed up very late, stupidly.
Did Bill Nye come to you, or did you go to him? Finally got him into the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I was determined to get him in. I wanted to get him in Half-Blood Prince, but we cut the scene out of the movie. So I love Bill. He's delightful, and he's such a nice man, and he's a good friend as well. And I was determined to get him in, and finally we only had him in for 2 or 3 days. These great actors turn up for like 4 days or 5 days and do their thing, and then go. That's the wonderful thing about Potter. We're very we're very lucky with those kind of people.
Did you get a chance to talk to Joe at all about the whole political analysis of
The Muggles and stuff.
Did you talk a little bit about that? Because that's pretty clear in the scene that you can kind of relate to things that are going on.
We never had a big conversation about that, because it was very present in the book, and she read the script and she was totally cool about the way we'd adapted it. So she was always very enthusiastic about the whole first script generally, but she's been really helpful. We had a good chat last week about a couple of scenes in part 2, the 2 scenes I was looking at in the assembly last week, and we phoned her up and I said, Joe, what were you thinking when you wrote this scene? And she was really helpful, actually. And she was sorry, baby.
Joe was a producer on the film, so how was that? How's her expanded role?
You know, it hasn't really changed from the other movies, honestly. She's just always there. She's our biggest supporter, and always very graceful and kind. And I think she just felt that, because she'd been there for us throughout, it was time. Her name was up there, and we're honoured, you know, that she wants to be up there with us. It's a real privilege.
How much time has occupied for you?
It'll be, when I finish, it'll be about 5 or 6 years, I think. I've lost count. It's been 5 or 6 years.
And then you're going to take a vacation?
I promise I'm going to take a vacation.
Anything else brewing?
I've got so many scripts coming in, I can't tell you. They're like my desk. In fact, I told them to stop sending them last week because I haven't read any of them. They're just all piled up. But I'm so ambitious, I can't tell you. It's a strange thing about Harry Potter because I don't feel any sense of ownership in a way. I don't feel territorial about it. I feel it's a bit of a national treasure. Then I'm curating, and I pour everything I can into it. I try and do my very best, and I'm very proud of the work I've done. But post Potter, my career sort of starts again, really. And I won't feel like I've made 4 of the biggest films in the world. I'll feel like, oh, that's it. I've done Potter now, and I'll have all these beautiful scripts, and I can begin. In a way, that's my plan. And I'm going to do big things and tiny little things, and have wizards in them.
No wizards.
No wizards.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank
Nice
you
to
so
see
much.
you guys. Yeah. Oh, good.
Best
Thank
of luck.
you. Oh, thank you so much.
You won't need it, though.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.